following sermon was presented on Sunday, October 23rd, 2016 by Pastor Daniel. It is titled, The Nations and the Culture of God. For more, please visit gladtidingschurchofgod.com. That's what Google Earth looks like. You can use your mouse, or if it's on your tablet, you can use your finger to look at any point in the world. And you can search through the whole world, and you can zoom in and zoom out. And every so often, I will fascinate myself with it. And basically, I'll just type in different places or look at different countries. I'll admit, I didn't pay attention that well growing up in school, and I need to refresh my memory when it comes to geography sometimes, and simply remembering where countries are, and especially in their relation to different countries. I put this picture up here especially because it shows you the border lines of places. This is Europe, or where is that? Europe. Yeah? Okay, good. So different border lines and the distinction between one country and another. And that app helps you to do that, but of course you can just look at a regular map as well. But I want to ask this question. I actually think that I asked this question a few weeks ago in a message, so we won't spend too much time on it here. So have you ever wondered, this is a question I want to ask, have you ever wondered why countries are divided along the lines that they are divided? That what makes one country different than another? And I'm going to share a little illustration, I guess, about the differences between countries, and I might be the only one who feels this way. And I don't even know if I fully expressed this to you, but it's this one of those things where every time we go to the States, I sometimes feel the need to be accepted by them. Does anybody feel that way when you go into, especially a new place, that you want to feel accepted by them? And what happens is we'll go to the States, especially like while we were at General Conference and we were speaking with people who are Americans, and I want to show them, I have this desire inside me to show them that we Canadians are not that different, okay? We're not that different than you Americans. You should accept me as an equal. So I'm not sure why I feel that way or why I feel the need to do that, but I think it has to do with, and this is probably we can all identify on some level, that we feel when you're labeled different, we don't feel good about that, right? That I don't think that any of us like being labeled different and ostracized in that way. And you know what, the funny thing is, there are some differences between Canadians and Americans, whether it's an accent or our culture or the food that we eat or whatever it might be, certain expressions that we might say, But the funny thing is, when you look at the U.S. as a whole, the U.S. is a big country, and there's different accents depending on the place you're in the country, and there's different expressions and y'all, and there's different foods that you eat depending on where you are, and all these sort of things. So why are all of them, with those differences, all called Americans? But even though we're very similar and we have slight differences, we're called Canadians. We're different. We have this distinction between us. And why am I classified as something different? Simply because I was born in a place that has a slightly different culture or in a different borderline. So maybe you don't feel that specifically, that example that I just gave, but like I said, I think we all feel ostracized at some point in our lives, right? We all feel that because we're not a part of a different group, we're a part of a different group, that the persons in the other group will treat us differently or will not accept us. So this feeling is natural and is the reality, and whether we like it or not, human beings are a part of groups. That the way we've developed as humanity is we've developed into groups, and by definition, to develop into groups, different groups, that is to the exclusion of others. We are a group here at Glad Tidings by no fault of our own. We didn't mean to do this, but we've excluded other people because we're here, right? And we're not somewhere else. That's, by definition, the nature of groups. And according to the Bible, if we infer from the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, we are all familiar with that story in the early chapters of the book of Genesis. At some point in our past, humanity was divided up into groups, and it was based upon the different languages that we speak. Now, social scientists might not agree with the details of the biblical story, but they would agree that human beings have developed throughout history based upon commonalities. So humanity has developed into groups, and those groups assembled and came to be because we found common traits. We found commonalities among us, and that's why one group found each other, and another group found each other, and so on and so forth, and it continued from there. And because we found each other and we developed in those groups, and we began reproducing with one another in those groups, and time passed and generations passed, traditions developed and certain traits developed within each of those groups. And so in one area of the world, you would have one group with their own traditions, with their own language, with their own preferences, their own religious traditions, and so on. And another area of the world, you'll have a different group, and they'll have their different and their own traditions and preferences and language and religious beliefs. So we don't know all of the reasons why people developed the way they did, but I would assume part of it is each group had their own unique challenges that they faced in that part of the world, and that's out of that developed their own culture. Now, I'm not an expert in sociology, so I can't further elaborate on this. I wish I could. I find it to be really interesting how things developed over time, how people and groups developed over time. But knowing that there are different groups in the world, each with their own culture, it can help us to ask a few questions. And I want to ask this question. Knowing that there's these different groups in the world, each with their own different culture, are some cultures better than others? Are some cultures better than others? And some, maybe even some of you, would emphatically say no culture is better than another. Now, everyone agrees that there are differences between cultures, but some would say that no culture is better than another, right? But I have to ask, is that true? Is it true that no culture is better than another? And what do I mean by better? What do we mean when we say better, that no culture is better than another? Because look at this. If you break things down into categories, let's take, for example, the area of IQ, right? The amount of intelligence according to that way of testing it. And if you look at this, and it's interesting, some would say, according to some studies, that Ashkenazi Jews and East Asians, as a people, score higher than other people groups in the world. So Ashkenazi Jews and East Asians score higher as a culture or as a people than other groups. And they would say that this is a result of genetic but also cultural factors, environmental factors. So in other words, in that particular area, Ashkenazi Jews or East Asians are better than other cultures, the other groups in the area of IQ. Now, in that area, they might be better, but think about it this way. There are other areas where there are other groups who are going to be better than them, right? So I won't try to elaborate on this because I think it makes people feel uncomfortable, and I think people might misunderstand me. Some people might feel uncomfortable speaking about one culture being better than another at some things, and rather than highlighting differences in this way, saying that some are better than others, some people say that we should be committed to multiculturalism, especially here in Canada. We hear that term a lot. That we should give equal celebration to all races, all religions, all cultures, and they're all equal in that way. And I would disagree with that in the sense of I don't think it makes sense to turn a blind eye to the differences in our cultures. That in some cases it is appropriate to say there are aspects of some cultures that are better than others. And by better, just to be clear on that point, I don't mean that somehow one group deserves more rights than another, or to say it the opposite way, I don't think that in whatever area a group might be inferior to another, I don't think that we should be able to treat them any differently in terms of their rights as human beings, as individual human beings, the right to life, the right to freedom, the right to own property, or the right to pursue happiness. So I don't want to highlight these differences in our cultures to get us to think that we're better as people, but that there are aspects of culture in terms of what God wants us to be doing that are better than others, and we need to identify those areas and then work to see change. So I'll put it this way. It's our duty as Christians to influence the people of the world to adopt God's culture. Can I get an amen on that if you agree with that? that the culture that will be established when Jesus returns and when he establishes God's kingdom on the earth, that's the culture that we need to be living out, and that's the culture that we need to be influencing the world to adopt. And that's, to me, is the very opposite of multiculturalism. It's because multiculturalism is the idea, as I said, that all cultures are fine and should be celebrated. And what I'm saying, and what I think the Bible's saying, is there's only one good culture, and that's God's culture, and we should all be adopting that culture. And it is then, and only then, as far as I can read from the Bible, it is then and only then that we will have world peace. You know, a lot of people think that this kind of equality in terms of multiculturalism is what will bring world peace. If only we give in and we just tell everybody that all cultures are the same, well, maybe we will have peace among us. But the Bible speaks differently and says that when everybody adopts God's culture, then we will have world peace. I love this passage from Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 to 4. It says this: "Now it will come about that in the last days the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, 'Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between the nations, and will render decisions for many peoples, and they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war.'" So let's just break this up a little bit and explore a little further. Here it says, "In the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains." So the prophet is speaking here, Isaiah is speaking of the reality of the last days. And that term can be applied to maybe a few different eras. But it definitely refers to this era, which is after Jesus has returned and he has established God's kingdom on the earth. That's the last days it's referring to. And it says that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. What is that referring to? The mountain of the Lord here is a reference to Mount Zion, the location of the Jerusalem temple, sadly where the Dome of the Rock Mosque is right now, where the temple of the Lord should be and was when Jesus was around 2,000 years ago and previous. So Isaiah is poetically saying here that the mountain of the house of the Lord, the Jerusalem temple, will be the place of worship in the world. It will be elevated above all other places of worship. The worship of the one true God will finally be the one true religion that is accepted by all peoples. And so it says this: if that's the case, the place of God's worship is elevated to that place, well then it makes sense that it then says many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, that he may teach us concerning his ways." So one thing that didn't even come to me when I was looking at this, but it's coming to me now, is that what's connected with the worship of the one true God is learning his ways. Do you see that connection there? I didn't even make it when I was studying it this week. That people will come to the mountain of the Lord, the place to worship the Lord, the place to worship the Lord, and what will they do? They will learn how to obey him according to his ways. So something within these people will inspire them to want to learn of God's ways. It's going to inspire them to leave their homes, leave their cultures behind, right? Because we're talking about all the different peoples of the world. They're going to leave their cultures behind, and instead they're going to seek a new home, so to speak, and they're going to adopt the culture of the Lord because they're going to want to learn his ways. So that's why it then says the law will go forth from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. What is this a reference to? The law will go forth, the Torah, the instruction, right? This is a reference to God's ways found in the Bible that we all hold dearly, has instructions for his people, amen? And this is what God wants the peoples to be learning. And indeed, in the kingdom, the law will go forth from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. God's ways will finally be known throughout the whole earth to all peoples. And it's going to be proclaimed from Jerusalem because that's where the kingdom will be first established. Now, it says this: people are going to want to come and learn. But then it says this, that speaking of Jesus, he will judge between the nations. They will hammer their swords into plowshares. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. So Messiah is here representing God. He will actually instruct the nations of the earth. right? He's going to instruct all of the nations of the earth on how to live their lives and how to have a society. And then we will finally have peace on earth, right? But it's not going to come as a result of negotiations or a result of it's going to become a result of God working in people's hearts, inspiring them to come to learn of God's ways in Jerusalem, and Messiah Jesus being there to instruct them. And what will result? Never learning war again. It's interesting that it's put that way, right? They will never again learn war. Never again will they learn war. That to me tells me that war needs to be learned. It's like a language that is learned. But here's the thing. What is it saying? It's saying that they will be so busy learning God's ways that they won't have time to learn war. Right? Shouldn't that be what we should be doing too? I tend to think that when we get into ruts where we're not doing what we should be doing and we're living contrary to God's way, I think we're not filling our time enough with God's word. Right? We're not studying and learning God's word and having it applied in our lives, because that's what we should be doing, and that's what's going to be the case in the kingdom. So as I said earlier, contrary to the opinion of many, the biblical way to peace is not multiculturalism, but rather for the peoples of the world to trade in their culture for the culture of the Bible. So that's the way to peace. To trade in your culture, the culture that you inherited as a result of your ethnicity and your where you were born, and to trade that in for the culture of the Bible. And just to make sure I'm not making this up, Paul said this in Ephesians 4. So this I say and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind. What does the word Gentile mean? Gentile means nation. It's referring to all of us, all the people of the world who are not literally a part of the nation of Israel. And so what is he saying? What's Paul saying we should be doing? To no longer live, no longer walk, means to live out. No longer live as our culture would dictate, but rather to live as who? As what? To live as God's people are supposed to live. Obviously, Jesus being the epitome of that, the great example of that. But I think he's speaking here in the context of the contrast between God's people, Israel, and the rest of the world. He's saying, no longer live as the rest of the world, as your culture that you inherited, but rather live as God's culture, which has been given to Israel. Now, to be clear, I don't think that means that all elements of our culture will be gone, that each of us won't have any elements of our previous culture. But I think that any element that is contrary to God's ways will be jettisoned, will be abolished. That we will instead adopt God's culture instead. So this is what we are called to as Gentiles. To no longer walk as Gentiles, but to instead learn from God's word, learn from God's people, and live out the culture that he gave them. So this is the interesting thing of the last 2,000 years, is that this has happened in many ways. That in many areas, we've already demonstrated how possible this is. That think about this. Previous to the Christian faith, there was only the people of the world were pagans. They worshipped false gods, idols. They were involved in all kinds of immorality, right? And so what has happened over the past 2,000 years is that we Gentiles, we people from the nations, we have in large measure traded in our culture for the culture of the Bible. But that being said, we're nowhere near where we need to be, right? We are a long way from the way things were, but in each church today, there's still a long way to go. But let me be positive just for another moment, that even in our church, or look at any church, the church on the screen there, what are you going to find? You're going to find people from all different backgrounds, right? All different cultures coming together to adopt God's culture. Is that not what a church is supposed to be? People from all different cultures coming together to adopt God's culture. So it's happening. But that journey that we are on is a long journey, but it will culminate in the kingdom when we will finally adopt fully God's culture. And the interesting thing is the nations of the world will be so focused on God and so focused on adopting his culture that we will then celebrate the festivals that are in the Bible. Look what it says this in Zechariah 14. That it will come about that any who are left of all the nations that went against Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Booths. So every year, people from the nations, it says, in the kingdom will go to Jerusalem, and they will celebrate the Feast of Booths, which is sometimes translated as Tabernacles, the Feast of Tabernacles. In Hebrew, it's called Sukkot. And Sukkot is a biblical holiday. It's listed there in Leviticus 23, and it's a time of joyful celebration. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago because it's so connected to Thanksgiving. It's a time to thank God for the provision of the fall harvest. And it's actually a holiday that this year began last Sunday night and is going to continue even to right, and it continues to this day. It's a 7-day holiday with an extra 8th day. Now, prophetically, though, this holiday of Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, prophetically, this holiday is a picture of the kingdom, right? This holiday, it tells us and it pictures for us the time when we will celebrate the final harvest. What kind of harvest? The harvest of people, the harvest of the resurrection of the dead. Jesus being the first fruits, all of us, the righteous, being the final harvest. So Sukkot prophetically shows us of and tells us of the future when God's people will be given resurrection. So in that way, biblically and also in Jewish practice, Sukkot has always been associated with the nations, with the people of the world. That it is a holiday specifically for Israel, that's what it says in the text, but it's always been associated with the whole rest of the world. So that's the interesting thing, that all of the people of the world will one day celebrate this holiday, and even to this day, you have many people around the world who go to Israel to celebrate this holiday, and many Christians are beginning to celebrate this holiday of Sukkot, the Feast of Booths. And there are a lot of positive things we can point to in the future, or rather at this point in time, in terms of we as God's people adopting God's culture. But the truth is we have a long way to go. That there are still many cultures out there that include deplorable things, right? Think of the cultures in the Middle East that just include some deplorable things that we would not want to include in our culture. So it's our job to bring a better culture, to bring God's culture to the world. We are representatives of Jesus, and Jesus has a mission to bring a light to the nations. And so we have to fulfill that mission for him while he is away. It says this in Isaiah 49, "I will also make you a light of the nations, so that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth." That's God prophetically speaking to Jesus, to the Messiah, saying, "I will make you a light of the nations, so that his salvation would reach to the ends of the earth." So as Jesus' disciples, as those who represent him, it's our job to bring that light to the rest of the world so that God's salvation will indeed spread throughout the world. And there are many things, many people in the world are waiting for God's culture. That's the interesting thing. Whether they know it consciously or not, there are many people waiting for God's culture. Look what it says in Isaiah 42, that Messiah will not be disheartened or crushed until he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands will wait expectantly for his law. So many people are looking for a better culture than what they have. I think the people who live in those cultures that include those deplorable things, they're waiting and expecting for a better culture to come. And they're waiting for us Christians to bring it to them, right? Who else but us, as Jesus' disciples, is going to bring that better culture to the world? And now, as we bring it to the world individually, on an individual level, hopefully one day, collectively, it will influence the entire culture. Now, let me reiterate. Paul's instruction was for Gentiles to no longer live as Gentiles, saying that they have been excluded from the life of God. Gentiles are excluded from the life of God. And so we need to adopt God's culture in order to be included in that life. And there are many areas that we could look at, but to close today's message, I just want to share about 2 specific areas that I think is important for us to focus on. If we're going to influence the world to adopt God's culture, they're going to have to see us living out God's culture first. So firstly, I just want to focus on the area of family. Paul said he condemned the fact that pagan Gentiles, they had given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. And of course, there are many things I could say about that, but I believe that we as Christians, we need to have a strong emphasis on having loving marriages, peaceful families, strong families, and to encourage people to be satisfied within that context. I see that the word greediness is there, right? There's nothing wrong with self-interest, but greediness to me is, at least the way I understand it, is being so self-interested that to the detriment of others. I see greediness among young people today who don't want to have families, who want to live only for themselves, live only for their pleasure. We need to make it fashionable, so to speak, to want to get married, to want to have families, to want to be satisfied in that context, right? We have enough evidence now, according to enough studies, that having a solid marriage and a good family life are the factors that will be needed to give children a good chance at a good life, right? In order for a person to grow up and have a good chance at having a good life, they need a solid marriage, parents, under them, and they need a solid family life. So I think we Christians need to be leading the charge on putting the emphasis on family, right? To having a strong and loving family. To through our example, show our children and our young people that it's a good thing to want to be having families, to get married and have families. So that is definitely one area that if we can influence the world, influence the culture, and to adopt God's way of thinking, that we will see great change in the world. Similarly, I think Christians need to be instilling in young people a sense of responsibility. That a person who works hard can earn a good life, and that to have a good society, there must be a respect for others and a respect for their property. Look what Paul said. This is what he condemned in pagan Gentile culture. He who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands and what is good, so that he will have something to share with the one who has need. So it's interesting. It has become the norm for so many people to just assume that if we're going to have poor people in society, well, we better have the government there to take care of them. That has become such the norm, and that's not God's way of thinking. In God's culture, people work hard to take care of their own. They keep the fruits of their labor, and then out of that prosperity, they take care of those who are less fortunate. Isn't that a better way than having just some third party take care of it, not taking the responsibility on ourselves? Right? We need to be working hard as individuals and as families to take care of ourselves, to take care of our families. And then if we live in that kind of society, hopefully we will keep the fruits of our labors, and out of that prosperity, we will then take care of those who are less fortunate. So I'll put it this way. In God's culture, each person is responsible for their own lives. And within each person, there is hopefully an ambition to contribute to society by being productive. And guess what? Out of the overflow of the heart, the Bible says, we should be giving, right? And so out of the overflow of the heart, we will then give to others who are in need. Now, guess what? If the world sees Christians having strong marriages, strong families, being hard workers, contributing to society, being productive, and being charitable, will we not see an incredible transformation in the world, seeing them influenced to want to adopt that culture? I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying that it's going to be immediate, but we can have that influence on the world. So these are just two important areas, nevertheless, but two areas in which we can affect change in the world, or we should affect change. We need to see people everywhere change their culture to reflect God's culture instead, and these are just two important areas that we can work in to see that change happen. Now, guess what? Thankfully, throughout the world, God is transforming lives. Let's have Sarah come as we're going to sing our last song this morning. This is what I want to end on and give a hopeful note, that God is transforming people's lives and people's cultures throughout the world. And my prayer, as we close our service this morning, my prayer is that we will join in on what God has been doing in the world and has been doing in Canada, and we'll see change here in Pelham and in the Niagara region. and we will be leading that charge because of what God is doing in our hearts and what God is doing in our lives. So let's stand together. Let's get excited about what God is doing, and let's commit ourselves to Him to be a part of what He is doing.